We have now 2.8 million people, 600,000 within the city, 2.8 million with the suburbs. For those of you like numbers and facts, figures, 2.8 million, that means more than 1/4 of the Portuguese population. You know, the population of Portugal, the whole country, is now 10.5 million. 10.5 million. Portugal being 5 times smaller than Spain, next door. We, Portugal, occupied the western part of this peninsula that we share with Spain, that you're touring these days with Amaya and Vasco. This is the Iberian Peninsula. Iberian Peninsula, Spain and Portugal. You're starting this tour in Lisbon, on the west coast of the peninsula, by the Atlantic Ocean. At some point you'll go through Madrid, which is right in the middle of the peninsula, the capital of the Kingdom of Spain. And you're going to finish in Barcelona, on the east coast of the same peninsula, by the Mediterranean Sea. It's a beautiful tour. I think you picked up a nice time of the year to come. Have you noticed the beautiful weather? Fantastic, almost November, autumn, and it's still beautiful. Nice temperatures, sunny days. The days are now shorter because we have just changed the time last weekend into winter time. So the days now become short, but it's still a very nice time of the year to come. Consider that the weather might become a bit more unpredictable at this time of the year, meaning that every once in a while you may get a shower, a bit of rain, but in general, really no complaints. Especially now in November, early November, we have here what you in America, I'm assuming that most of you are from the US, and Canadians, by the way. No Canadians? There's something you know by the name of Indian summer. Indian summer. We call it Saint Martin's summer. Saint Martin's summer. It's usually at the beginning of November. The temperatures go up again. Sunny days. But then after that period, it might go down again. But it's a lovely time of the year to come to both Spain and Portugal.
What is the sea with the circle around it? The Red Sea.
Continente supermarket. Continente. It's walking distance from your hotel, Continente. But there's another grocery store closer to your hotel. But if you want to come to this one with the letter C, C for Continente. It's a chain of supermarkets. It's open till 9 p.m. It's a great place to go because sometimes when you're traveling, not always you're in the mood to go out for dinner, especially these first couple of days. And some of you enjoy going to a grocery store, supermarket, buy a nice bottle of wine, some crackers, cheese, some grapes, and have a nice picnic in the comfort of your room. That's what sometimes travelers do when you're a bit tired, instead of going to a restaurant, right? You know a little bit more about Lisbon. You know that Lisbon is a very, very old city. Lisbon is actually older than Rome in centuries. In Europe, there's one capital city, that is older than Lisbon, and it's not Rome, it's Athens. You know that Lisbon had been founded by the Phoenicians. Have you heard about these people? Phoenicians, from the history books. Phoenicians came from present-day Lebanon and Syria, from the East Mediterranean. They were the ones who first settled here more than 3,000 years ago. The foundation of Lisbon goes back to the year 1200 before Common Era, BCE. And many people had been through. Phoenicians, Greeks, Carthaginians, Romans, Visigoths, Suevi, Alani, Jews, Muslims, Christians. If you put all these people in a blender, and if you mix them all, the result would be Amaya, Vasco, and Pedro. What about this? You're to a manager, driver, and local guide today. What I'm trying to say in a light way is that Portugal and the Portuguese people, and this applies to Spain and the Spanish people, we are the result of all these different people, all these different groups who have been here before throughout the centuries. So there's a lot of history involved. Consider that Spain and Portugal, we are actually included in the group of Mediterranean countries. So the cradle of our civilization is this Greek-Roman, right? that in a way or another we all share somehow. So Lisbon is actually a very, very old city. When you look at the map, you see the city itself. Lisbon is built or was born on the right bank of a big river. I'll come back to that river later. By the Atlantic Ocean. So Lisbon has been for centuries a very important commercial hub, for trade and business, commerce, a city of sailors and navigators, explorers and fishermen. All right, so it's quite amazing. And now, ladies and gentlemen, finally, we are now by the big roundabout in front of us with the statue in the middle. This is the Marquis of Pombal Square. Have you been here before? Some of you perhaps. It's very close to your hotel. Let me tell a few words about this gentleman in front of us. We'll be now going around the square. This is the Marquis of Pombal. This gentleman was the Prime Minister of Portugal at the time of the biggest catastrophe of our history ever. Do you know what I'm talking about, anyone? Lisbon's earthquake. November 1st, that's All Saints' Day, by the way, of the year 1755, Lisbon almost disappeared. There was a big earthquake. It destroyed 3/4 of the city of Lisbon, killing well over 30,000 people in one morning, followed by a tsunami. Lisbon was on fire for 1 week, a combination of elements. The quake itself, water, fire, all combined together, caused a great deal of destruction. Long story short, at the time of the earthquake, we had this gentleman right in front of us now as our Prime Minister. After the earthquake, he surrounded himself with the best of our architects and engineers at the time to plan the reconstruction of the city from the ashes. He was a brilliant man of those days, 1700s, well-traveled. He had been ambassador of Portugal in London, in Vienna, and he brought from abroad the new ideas of the Enlightenment, developing commerce, industry, agriculture, education. And he has the honor of occupying, here where we are, the most central square in Lisbon. So over to your left, the statue of the Marquis of Pombal, represented together with a lion on top of the column. Can you spot the lion up there? Some people said that this gentleman was such a powerful man and fearless that instead of having a dog or a cat as a home pet, you had a lion, but that's not true. The lion is a symbol of power, right? A symbol of strength, so to say. See. So the roundabout on the left. As we make a right here, ladies and gentlemen, do you realize that we went on a kind of loop, and we are now, as we make a right, we'll be turning left again, but your hotel is on the 3rd street to the right. If you go up this avenue where you see Burger King on the right side, I pick up a name that it's easy to recall, right? Burger King on the right side. If you continue straight ahead, 1st, 2nd, the 3rd street to the right will take you to the hotel. Well, actually, the 2nd one already takes you to the hotel. The 2nd or the 3rd, both. So ladies and gentlemen, for your orientation, we are now turning left. Take a look over to the right. Can you see those cranes on the right side?
Yeah.
The blue and white cranes. The hotel is right there. So let me put it like this for you to understand what we are doing with you, everyone. Look, from your hotel on the right side, you can easily walk down to the big roundabout. From the roundabout, there's a big wide avenue going down to the left, Liberty Avenue. We'll be doing that this morning, but we leave that for the end of this morning tour for one simple reason. Many of you, our experience tells us that many of you may wish to stay in downtown Lisbon to get some lunch, to walk around, explore more of the city, go down towards the river, to explore more of Lisbon. So we are going to leave that part of the city, downtown, to the end of this morning tour. Okay, so that means that at some point we'll be going down that wide Liberty Avenue towards the river, then we'll finish at the hotel. You don't have to decide right now, but at some point you will tell us whether you prefer to stay in downtown Lisbon around 11ish or finish at the hotel. Okay, the tour will finish at the hotel, but there will be one last stop in downtown for those who wish to stay there, right? You may start thinking of, I mean, then you'll decide. You don't have to think of that now, but at least you have the choice. So far so good, or is this too much talking?
It's great.
Muy bien. Yo creo que sale desde jardín zoológico, ¿no? O sea, de Oriente sale. Bueno, ahora lo miramos en la parada. Miramos. Normalmente creo que sí puede ser de Oriente, pero muchos salen también de Siete Ríos, ¿sabes? Siete Ríos, donde la estación de autobuses
Más
es,
principal, sí,
sí, es Siete Ríos, donde el jardín zoológico. Ahora lo miramos, ahora te lo miro. Sí, sí. So this is again part of this district of Avenidas Novas, new avenues. Around here, right and left, you can see buildings from the 1930s, 40s, 50s, 60s. Well, continuing, we have buildings from the 1980s, 90s, 2000 even. The thing is that at some point, Lisbon became stuck in itself because of its geography. The city cannot really grow much anymore because of its geography. On one side, we have a big river. That's the river Tagus. On the other side, we have the Atlantic Ocean. On the opposite side, we have other municipalities. So Lisbon became this, or remained this, medium-sized capital, relatively small, because it cannot really grow much anymore. Well, the city can grow in height, but we don't build much in height, except for a few skyscrapers that we may have here and there. In general, buildings are small, and this has to do with the fact that Lisbon is very close to a tectonic fault for earthquakes. On the left side, there's a big building over to your left. This is the famous Spanish department store El Corte Inglés. 100% Spanish investment here in Lisbon, El Corte Inglés. You're going to find it in every major town in Spain. You have it in Seville, Granada, Madrid, Barcelona. So at some point, I'm sure you'll see and visit the El Corte Inglés department store. It's open from 10 till 10. It's a great place for shopping and also to watch people and get some food. There's a beautiful food court inside, a very nice supermarket, cinemas also. It's open from 10 a.m. till 10 p.m. Some people compare it to Macy's, but I have to disagree. I would compare it to Nordstrom, more likely. It's an upscale super department store, El Corte Inglés. And then to the left, as we turn, you'll see another famous brand that you know, Starbucks. But you know, Starbucks was a bit of a flop in Portugal. It's not very popular among the Portuguese people, you know, Starbucks. Nothing against them, don't get me wrong. The point is that before the arrival of Starbucks to Portugal years ago, coffee to go was just unheard of. We Portuguese people, we could not believe or imagine in our wilder dreams that it was possible to drink coffee and walk at the same time. We don't do coffee to go in Portugal, we do coffee to stay, coffee to sit. So everything around here tends to be a little bit slower. You need to get used to that. Just take a long deep breath, breathe in, breathe out, enjoy the Portuguese rhythm of life. We live in a kind of slow motion. Slow food, slow coffee, slow wine, slow motion, and of course that reflects also on the economy. Slower economy as well. Even in the busiest financial areas of Lisbon, where people are always on the go, if you watch the Portuguese people going around for coffee, we go into a bar, we sit down, we definitely sit down. We order coffee, you know, a little tiny cup of coffee, you know, espresso. We sit down and we stay in front of that tiny cup of coffee in front of us for the next 3 hours. Doing what, you may wonder? Well, basically complaining about the economy, blaming the government. It's like a national hobby here, you know? And that's the reason why Starbucks is not very popular. Ladies and gentlemen, another characteristic of Lisbon, you know, Lisbon is a very hilly city. The city itself is built on 7 hills, 7. And from the top of the hills, you enjoy beautiful views overlooking the other hills and the river. So coming up to your left, everyone, where we have these 2 big white columns in white color. These columns, by the way, on the left side were built in 1957 for the visit of the Queen of England, Elizabeth II. They represent the Anglo-Portuguese alliance. On the left side, the white columns, they represent the alliance we have with the British, an alliance that goes back to the year 1386. I'm talking about the famous Treaty of Windsor, signed between England and Portugal more than 600 years ago. Look at the nice view on the left side, everyone. It's a clear day, you can see the hills, the shape of the city, the geography of the city, and down there that's the river Tagus. We spell T-A-G-U-S, river Tagus. You're going to see this river again with that Maya and Vasco in a few days from now in a beautiful city not to be missed. If you want to understand Spain, you definitely must see a town called Toledo in Spain. It's beautiful. It's one of the most beautiful cities in Europe, not just in Spain. Toledo. And there, in Toledo, you're going to see this same river again. Spanish people call the river Tajo. In Portuguese, Tejo. In English, Tagus. Different names, but it's always the same river. It's an international river coming from Spain, 600 miles long river, finishing here in Lisbon by the Atlantic Ocean. On the other side of the river, what we see is Portugal, of course, but it's not Lisbon anymore. On the other side of the river, we have other towns, villages. There's a relatively important industrial region, but really, it's not Lisbon anymore. Lisbon is on the right bank of the river where we are. Tomorrow, there's no choice. With Amaya and Vasco, you'll be crossing the river to go south and then southeast onto Seville, Spain. So you'll be crossing the river tomorrow on the way to Spain already. The name of this place where we are, by the way, this is a park, a green area, you can tell right and left, it's a park, we are surrounded by this park. This park bears the name of an English monarch. It's called Edward VII. For those who may not know or remember, Edward VII was the great-grandfather of Queen Elizabeth II. Edward visited Lisbon in 1903. His name was given to this park. Queen Elizabeth II visited Portugal twice. In 1957 first, when she was still a very young queen. That's when we built these columns across the street over your shoulder and in front of us over here to the left. These columns were built in 1957 in the occasion of the visit of the Queen to Portugal, 1957. And again, in case you missed it, they represent the Anglo-Portuguese alliance. There's a long list of connections between Britain and Portugal, since they are our eternal friends and allies that for more than 600 years. So this is Edward VII Park, and well, let's see. Yep.
Most people own their apartments or townhouses, or
Most people own the place where they live. Most people live in condos, but many people also rent houses. But the majority of the people, they own, because it's considered, let's say, an investment for life, to buy property, to buy a house. Of course, many people are still paying the mortgage, of course, to the bank with a rate of interest. There was a crisis years ago that affected the whole world, remember well. And now banks are not lending money that easily as they did in the past. So there is now a higher percentage of people also renting rather than to buy. But the tendency here is to buy rather than to rent. So most people own their apartments. Let's now drive through the park. For those who like flora, plants, flowers, trees. These are umbrella pine trees on the right side, roundish, from where we get the pine nuts, pignoli. On the sidewalk, these are now English plane trees and sycamore trees. As we continue driving through the park, you may find also some palm trees and cypresses, magnolias, Norfolk pines, acacias, mimosas, cypresses, and also jacaranda. You know jacaranda trees? Native from South America. Well, they grow in Spain and Portugal. You may find them in Southern California, Florida. but they come mostly from Brazil and Argentina. You may find them in India, South Africa, Australia. When they blossom here in May, June, Lisbon becomes purple. It's a tree that when it blossoms, it's all purple. It's beautiful. Jacaranda trees are the ones you see on the right side, on the sidewalk. But at this time of the year, of course, they're not in blossom. The flower lasts for 8 to 10 weeks maximum in May, June, and it's all purple. Right and left is our now jacaranda trees. Jacaranda with the letter J.
Can you estimate the cost of a two-bedroom apartment?
A two-bedroom apartment in Lisbon costs an average of 400,000 euros. It depends on the location, on the size of the house, but average 400,000 for a two-bedroom apartment. Average. In some areas it can be 700,000. In some areas a little bit outside of the city already it can be 300,000. Average 450,000 euros. Two-bedroom apartment without garage to park. And parking is a serious problem here. Look at the nice park on the left side. Just a minute ago we were up there between those columns. And back on the square of the Marquis of Pombal. For some reason I cannot explain, Portuguese people love roundabouts.